The morning sun painted the Korean mountains in soft, golden light as 12-year-old Mina pressed her nose against the cool window of the research station. Far below, the valley stretched out like a green carpet dotted with tiny villages. She could see smoke rising from chimneys where families were starting their day, completely unaware that this would be their last normal morning. "Mina, come help me with these samples," called her father, Park Do-yeon, from across the laboratory. His white coat was already stained with various colored liquids from his morning experiments. Mina sighed and turned away from the window. At 12 years old, she was tall for her age with curious dark eyes that seemed to absorb everything around her. Her father often said she had the mind of a scientist, always asking questions about how things worked. "What are you studying today, Papa?" she asked, walking over to where he stood hunched over a microscope. "Alien plant samples from the Antarctic expedition," he replied, adjusting the focus. "The ice melted last year and revealed some very strange organisms. They don't match anything in our databases." Mina had grown up surrounded by her father's work. After her mother died when she was 7, the research station had become their home. She knew more about xenobiology than most college students, though. She preferred reading adventure stories to scientific journals. "Can I look?" she asked, and her father stepped aside with a smile. Through the microscope, Mina saw something that made her gasp. The cells moved in patterns that seemed almost purposeful, like they were communicating with each other. "Papa, these don't look like Earth plants at all." "That's exactly what worries me," her father said quietly, before he could explain further. Every alarm in the station began screaming at once. Red lights flashed throughout the laboratory as automated systems activated. The main communication screen flickered to life, showing an emergency broadcast from Seoul. "This is not a drill," the broadcaster's voice shook with fear. "Unknown objects have appeared in Earth's atmosphere. All citizens are advised to seek immediate shelter." Mina and her father rushed to the main observation deck. What they saw made Mina's blood turn to ice. Massive dark shapes hung in the sky like floating cities, their surfaces covered in strange geometric patterns that seemed to shift and change as she watched. "How many ships are there?" Mina whispered. Her father was already at the emergency communication panel, trying to contact other research stations. "I count at least 50 over Korea alone. There must be hundreds worldwide." The ships were enormous, each one several kilometers long. They moved with impossible grace for their size, positioning themselves over major population centers. Mina watched in fascination and growing terror as smaller craft began emerging from the larger vessels like insects from a hive. "Papa, what do they want?" Park Do-yeon's face had gone pale as he listened to reports flooding in from around the world. "I don't know, but we need to prepare for the worst." The first attack came without warning. Beams of brilliant blue light struck down from the ships, and where they touched, everything simply vanished. Not destroyed or burned, but completely erased as if it had never existed. Mina watched in horror as an entire city district disappeared in seconds. "Seoul is gone," her father said in a hollow voice, staring at the communication screen that now showed only static where the capital city's signals used to be. More reports came in rapid succession. Tokyo erased, New York vanishing beam by beam, London silent. The aliens, whoever they were, worked with terrifying efficiency. They seemed to target government buildings, military bases, and communication centers first. "Papa, what about the people?" Mina asked, tears streaming down her face. "Some will survive," he said, though his voice carried little hope. "The beams only hit specific targets." "But without governments or military?" A new sound filled the air, a deep humming that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The smaller alien craft were moving lower, spreading out across the countryside. Mina could see them clearly now through the observation windows. They looked like silver teardrops, smooth and seamless, moving with liquid grace. "They're scanning," her father said, checking his instruments. "Some kind of biological survey. They're cataloging Earth's life forms. Why would they do that? Maybe they want to know what they're dealing with. Or maybe—" He paused, his scientific mind working through terrible possibilities. Maybe they want to harvest our biosphere. The reality of their situation hit Mina like a physical blow. These weren't explorers or diplomats. They were conquerors, and humanity had been completely unprepared. Every military defense had been neutralized in the first few minutes of the attack. "We need to hide," her father said suddenly, moving to a control panel Mina had never seen him use before. "There's a bunker beneath the station. It was built during the old wars, but I modified it for emergencies like this." "What kind of emergencies?" Mina asked, following him as he gathered supplies. "The kind where humanity faces extinction." The bunker entrance was hidden behind a false wall in the storage room. As they descended the metal stairs, Mina could hear the alien craft getting closer. Their humming had become a roar that made the walls vibrate. The underground facility was larger than Mina had imagined, with enough supplies to last months. Her father had prepared for this possibility, she realized. Somehow, he had known this day might come. "The samples you were studying," she said suddenly. "They weren't from Antarctica, were they?" Her father stopped loading equipment and looked at her with sad eyes. "You're too smart for your own good, Mina. No, they weren't from Antarctica. We found them at various sites around the world over the past 5 years, always in places where the ice had melted or the ground had shifted." "They were scouts," Mina said, understanding flooding through her. "The aliens sent advanced teams to study Earth." "We think so. But by the time we figured it out, it was too late to warn anyone who would listen." A massive explosion shook the bunker and dust rained from the ceiling. Through the bunker's communication system, they could hear the research station above being destroyed. Mina felt tears on her cheeks as she realized their home was gone. "What do we do now, Papa?" Park Do-yeon activated the bunker's lockdown sequence. Heavy blast doors sealed them in, cutting off all outside communication. "Now we wait," he said. "And we hope that somewhere out there, other humans are doing the same thing?" As the bunker's lights dimmed to emergency power, Mina curled up next to her father and tried not to think about the world ending above their heads. She was just a child, but she understood that everything had changed forever. The question now was whether humanity would survive long enough to fight back. Outside, the alien ships continued their systematic destruction, unaware that in a small bunker beneath the Korean mountains, a 12-year-old girl was already beginning to plan. 3 days passed in the underground bunker before the terrible silence came. The constant rumbling and explosions from above had become almost normal, like background noise that told them the world was still ending. But when everything went quiet, Mina knew something had changed. "Papa, why did they stop?" she whispered, afraid that even her quiet voice might be heard by whatever was waiting above. Park Do-yeon checked the bunker sensors for the 100th time. His hands shook as he read the displays. "The air is clean. No radiation, no toxic gases. But there are no human radio signals anywhere." "What does that mean?" "It means they finished their work." Mina felt her stomach drop. She had hoped that somewhere human armies were fighting back, that governments were making plans, that adults were fixing this terrible situation like they always did. But the silence told a different story. On the 4th day, her father became very sick. It started with a cough, then fever, then something worse. Mina did everything she could, following the medical procedures he had taught her, but nothing helped. By the 6th day, she knew he was dying. "Mina," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Listen carefully. The emergency exit leads to the old mining tunnel. Follow it east until you reach the river. Stay away from open areas. The aliens use different senses than us." "I don't want to leave you, Papa. You have to." He pressed a small device into her hands. "This scanner will help you avoid their technology. Remember everything I taught you about survival. Remember that being small and smart is better than being big and strong. But I'm just a kid. I don't know how to survive alone." Her father smiled weakly. "You're not just any kid, Mina. You understand things that most adults miss. Trust your mind. Not what others tell you is impossible." Park Do-yeon died that night, and Mina cried until she had no tears left. But when morning came, she knew she had to leave. The bunker's power was failing, and she could not stay underground forever. The emergency tunnel was dark and narrow, barely wide enough for her small body. She crawled for what felt like hours before finally seeing daylight ahead. When she emerged, the world she found was not the one she remembered. The forest looked wrong. Many trees were gone, leaving behind perfectly round circles of bare earth. The remaining plants had a strange color, as if they were sick. Even the air smelled different. Metallic and sharp. Mina activated her father's scanner and immediately understood why he had given it to her. The device showed energy patterns everywhere, invisible webs of alien technology covering the landscape. She could see patrol routes, sensor nets, and communication beams that would have been impossible to detect with human eyes alone. She spent her first day above ground learning to read these patterns. The aliens moved in predictable ways, following the same paths repeatedly. Their sensors focused on large objects and heat signatures, but seemed to miss small, slow-moving targets that stayed close to natural cover. That night, hidden in a cave, Mina made her first important discovery. While examining her father's scanner more carefully, she found recordings he had made during their last days in the bunker. His voice, weak but determined, explained things he had not had time to tell her. "The aliens call themselves the Vorthek Empire," his recorded voice said. "We intercepted some of their communications. They see Earth as a biological treasure house, but they consider humans to be nothing more than pests. They never expected organized resistance because they destroyed our governments and military so quickly." Mina listened to hours of recordings as her father explained everything he had learned. The Vorthek used advanced scanning technology, but it was designed to track armies and vehicles, not individual people. Their ships could destroy cities, but their ground forces were actually quite small. "Most importantly," her father's voice continued, "they think in very rigid patterns. They expect enemies to act like the civilizations they conquered before. They don't understand humans who refuse to follow rules." Over the following weeks, Mina learned to be invisible. She discovered that Vorthek scanners could not detect her if she moved slowly and stayed near water, which interfered with their sensors. She learned to recognize the sound of their patrol craft from kilometers away. Most importantly, she learned that they ignored anything they considered too small to be a threat. She began venturing closer to the areas where she detected Vorthek activity. What she found amazed her. The aliens had built processing stations where they collected Earth's plants and animals, sorting them like items in a warehouse. But their security was focused outward, watching for large groups of human survivors who might attack in traditional ways. Mina realized she could walk right past their guards if she was careful. The Vorthek were tall, nearly 3 meters each, and their vision seemed optimized for spotting large threats. A small 12-year-old girl moving quietly through shadows barely registered to their senses. She started taking things. Small items at first, pieces of their technology that she could study. The scanner her father had given her helped her understand how their devices worked. She learned that Vorthek technology relied on central control systems. Each device was connected to a network, receiving orders from command units, but Mina also discovered something the aliens had not expected. Some of their stolen Earth samples were fighting back. Plants and animals they had collected were adapting to alien environments faster than the Vorthek could study them. Earth life was proving to be more resilient than anyone had imagined. One day, while hiding near a Vorthek processing station, Mina saw something that changed everything. A group of human survivors attacked the facility using conventional military tactics. They had weapons and training, but they moved in formation like soldiers had always done. The Vorthek defenses destroyed them in minutes. Mina watched in horror as brave people died because they fought the way humans had always fought wars. They used the tactics that had worked against other humans, but were useless against aliens who thought completely differently. That night, hidden in an abandoned building, Mina made a decision that would change the course of the war. She would not fight like an adult. She would not try to be the soldier the Vorthek expected. Instead, she would be exactly what she was, a small, smart, adaptable human child who could go places others could not go and think thoughts others could not think. she began planning her first real mission. Not to destroy or attack, but to learn and adapt. The Vorthak had made one crucial mistake when they invaded Earth. They had underestimated what humans could become when everything familiar was taken away. Meta is about to show them that being small did not mean being helpless, and that the most dangerous enemy was often the one you never saw coming. 2 months after emerging from the bunker, Mina had become a ghost in the ruined landscape. She moved through the shadows of what used to be towns and cities, collecting information and supplies while avoiding both Vorthak patrols and human survivors. She had learned that other people meant noise, and noise meant death. But on a cold morning in September, while searching an abandoned pharmacy for medical supplies, she heard something that made her freeze. Human voices speaking in hushed Korean coming from beneath her feet. "The patrol passed 20 minutes ago," a man's voice said. "We have maybe 3 hours before they come back." Mena found the hidden entrance behind a collapsed shelf. Her small size allowed her to squeeze through gaps that would stop an adult. Following the voices, she crawled down into what had once been the building's basement, but was now clearly a hidden refuge. What she found was both hopeful and heartbreaking. 6 adults had created a small underground camp, complete with sleeping areas, a makeshift kitchen, and walls covered with maps and photos of missing family members. They looked thin and tired, but alive. The first person to notice her was a woman with short gray hair who was cleaning an old rifle. She looked up and gasped, nearly dropping her weapon. "There's a child here," she called out in amazement. The others turned to stare at Mena as if she was a miracle. A tall man with a soldier's bearing stepped forward, his eyes wide with disbelief. "How did you get here, little one?" he asked gently. "Where are your parents?" Mena remained silent, studying these strangers. Her months alone had taught her to be careful with trust. But these people looked like they needed help as much as she did. "My name is Kim Woojin," the soldier said, crouching down to her level. "I used to be in the army before everything went wrong." "This is Choi Hae-jin," he pointed to a woman with oil-stained hands. "She was an engineer." "And that's Yoon Tae-wan," indicating an elderly man surrounded by electronic equipment. "He's a scientist." The gray-haired woman who had first seen her spoke next. "I'm Dr. Onsumi. Are you hurt, child? Are you alone?" Mina finally found her voice. "My father died. I've been surviving by myself." The silence that followed was heavy with shared grief. Everyone in the room had lost people they loved. But their amazement at finding a child who had survived alone for 2 months was clear on their faces. "You can't have been out there by yourself," Woojin said, shaking his head. "It's impossible. The Vorthak scanners would have found you in hours." "I know how to avoid their scanners," Mena said simply. The adults exchanged looks that clearly said they thought she was confused or lying. Children, their expressions suggested, could not possibly understand alien technology well enough to avoid detection. "Sweetheart," Dr. Sumi said in the patient voice adults used with confused children, "their technology is very advanced. Even our military experts couldn't figure out how to hide from them." "That's because they were thinking wrong," Mina replied. Engineer Choi Hae-jin laughed, not meanly, but in the way people laugh at something cute a child has said. "Oh, really? And how should they have been thinking?" Mina pulled out her father's scanner and activated it. The device immediately showed the Vorthak energy patterns surrounding their hideout. The adults stared in shock as complex alien sensor networks became visible on the small screen. "The Vorthak don't think like humans," Mina explained, manipulating. "The scanners controls with practiced ease. They scan for big groups, hot engines, metal weapons, but they don't really look for one small person moving slowly." "Where did you get that device?" Scientist Yoon Tae-wan asked, his voice filled with wonder. "My father made it. He studied alien technology before the invasion." Mina showed them the energy patterns on the screen. "See this red line? That's a patrol route, and these blue dots are sensor stations. If you know where they are, you can walk between them." The adults spent the next hour asking Mina dozens of questions about what she had seen during her time alone. They were amazed by her detailed knowledge of Vorthok patrol schedules, sensor capabilities, and base locations. But Mena could tell they still didn't really believe a child could be so capable. That belief changed 3 days later when their food supplies ran dangerously low. "We need to raid the supply depot 2 kilometers north," Wujin announced during their morning meeting. "But it's heavily guarded. We'll need to wait for a distraction or fight our way in." "Both options will get us killed," Haijin pointed out. "Their security systems are too advanced." "I can get the supplies?" Mena said quietly. The adults turned to look at her with expressions ranging from protective concern to gentle amusement. "That's very brave," Dr. Sumi said, "but it's far too dangerous for a child." "You don't understand?" Mena insisted. "I've been watching that depot for weeks. I know exactly how to get in and out without being detected." "Absolutely not," Wujin said firmly. "I won't risk a child's life on a mission like this." But as their food situation grew desperate over the next 2 days, and as their own scouting missions confirmed that a direct assault would be suicide, they began to listen more carefully to Mena's suggestions. She drew detailed maps of the depot's layout, showing guard positions, sensor blind spots, and the exact timing of patrol changes. Her observations were so precise and thorough that even skeptical Wujin had to admit she knew things that could only come from extensive, first-hand surveillance. "The loading dock has a gap in sensor coverage for exactly 4 minutes during shift changes," Mina explained, pointing to her hand-drawn map. "And the storage containers are only guarded by automated systems that don't scan below 1 meter in height." Finally, with their last food rations consumed, the adults agreed to let Mena attempt what she called a shopping trip. The mission that followed became the stuff of legend among the underground survivors. Mena slipped out of their hideout at dawn, moving through sensor networks like smoke through a forest. She entered the heavily guarded Vorthok supply depot, collected enough food and medical supplies to last the group for weeks, and returned before lunch. She did all of this without triggering a single alarm or alerting a single guard. When she returned, carrying a backpack full of alien food containers and human medical supplies, the adults stared at her in speechless amazement. "How?" was all Wujin could manage to say. "I told you," Mena replied, unpacking supplies with the matter-of-fact attitude of someone who had just completed a routine errand. "You have to think differently." That night, as the group enjoyed their first real meal in weeks, the adults looked at the 12-year-old girl with new eyes. She wasn't just a child they needed to protect. She was their best hope for survival. Word traveled fast in the underground world of human survivors. Within weeks of Mina's successful supply raid, other resistance cells began seeking out the mysterious child, who could walk through Vorthok defenses like they didn't exist. The stories grew with each telling, but the core truth remained the same. A 12-year-old girl was accomplishing what trained soldiers could not. The first group to find them was led by Han Junwoo, a former police captain who had been organizing survivors in the southern regions. He arrived at their hideout with 3 companions, all looking skeptical despite the stories they had heard. "Show me this miracle child," Junwoo said bluntly to Wujin. His tone made it clear he expected to find the stories greatly exaggerated. When Mena appeared from the depths of their underground refuge, Junwoo's expression shifted from skepticism to confusion. She was smaller than he had imagined, with the serious eyes of someone who had seen too much but still carried herself like the child she was. "You're the one they call the Ghost Walker?" he asked, using the nickname that had begun spreading among survivor groups. "I don't call myself anything," Mina replied simply. "I just do what needs to be done." Junwoo had brought a challenge with him. His group desperately needed to retrieve supplies from a Vorthok research facility, but it was the most heavily defended location they had encountered. Traditional assault was impossible, and even getting close enough to scout it had cost them 2 good people. "If you're really as capable as they say," Junwoo told Mina, "prove it. Get us intelligence on this facility. But I won't believe children's stories until I see results." Mena studied the rough map Junwoo had drawn and recognized the location immediately. She had been observing that facility for weeks, fascinated by the strange experiments the Vorthak conducted there. But she had never tried to enter because it seemed too dangerous even for her. "I'll need 2 days," she said after considering. "The challenge. 2 days for what? You haven't even seen the place yet?" "I've been watching it for a month," Mena replied calmly. "I just need time to plan the entry route." The look of surprise on Junwoo's face was worth the risk she was about to take. Mina's infiltration of the research facility became legendary among the resistance networks. She spent 18 hours inside the heavily guarded complex, moving through ventilation systems and maintenance tunnels that the Vorthak had never imagined a human could access. She photographed their research, copied their computer files, and even sabotaged several experiments before escaping undetected. The intelligence she brought back changed everything the survivors knew about their enemy. The Vorthak were not just harvesting Earth's resources randomly. They were specifically searching for biological materials that could enhance their own technology. More importantly, they were having problems with their conquest that they were trying to hide from their superiors. "Earth life is fighting back," Mina explained to the gathered survivors as she showed them the stolen data. "Plants and animals they captured are adapting faster than they expected. Some of their facilities have been contaminated by Earth bacteria that their systems can't control." This information revealed something crucial. The Vorthak were not as invincible as they appeared. Their technology was advanced but inflexible. When faced with unexpected biological responses, they struggled to adapt. Han Junwoo looked at the intelligence reports with growing amazement. "How did you understand their computer systems well enough to copy this data?" "I've been learning their language for months," Mina said. "Their writing system is actually simpler than Korean once you understand the patterns." Word of Mina's success spread to resistance cells across the continent. Soon, representatives from dozens of survivor groups were making dangerous journeys to meet the child who could penetrate Vorthak defenses. Each group brought their own impossible requests, and Mina began to see the bigger picture of human resistance. Song Yunji arrived from the eastern coastal regions with news that changed Mina's understanding of the war. Her group had discovered that the Vorthak were not a single unified force. Different factions within their empire had different goals, and some were beginning to compete with each other for the best Earth resources. "They're starting to fight among themselves," Yunji explained. "If we could make that fighting worse, we might have a chance." Mena realized that this was exactly the kind of thinking the resistance needed. Instead of trying to match Vorthak's strength with human strength, they needed to turn the aliens' own nature against them. Over the following months, Mena began coordinating operations between different survivor groups. Her small size and undetectable movement made her the perfect messenger and scout for a growing network of resistance cells. But more than that, her unique perspective allowed her to see opportunities that military-trained adults missed. She developed what she called confusion tactics. Instead of attacking Vorthak facilities directly, resistance groups would sabotage them in ways that made it look like competing Vorthak factions were responsible. Supply shipments would be redirected rather than destroyed, making it appear that rival commanders were stealing resources. Research data would be altered subtly, causing experiments to fail in ways that suggested sabotage from within the Vorthak ranks. The strategy worked better than anyone had hoped. Within 6 months, Vorthak commanders across Earth were reporting suspicious activities to their superiors, each one convinced that other factions were working against them. The rigid hierarchy that made them efficient conquerors became a weakness when suspicion and paranoia began spreading through their ranks. But Mina's greatest contribution was teaching other humans to think like her. She showed adult survivors how to move like children, how to hide in places that seemed too small or obvious, and how to see patterns that military training had taught them to ignore. "Stop thinking like soldiers," she told a gathering of resistance leaders. "Soldiers fight. Other soldiers, we're not fighting soldiers. We're fighting aliens who expect us to act like the civilizations they conquered before. If we act differently, they won't know how to respond." Her unconventional approach began spreading throughout the resistance network. Small groups started using tactics that would have been considered cowardly or impossible in traditional warfare. They struck at targets that seemed unimportant but disrupted Vorthak operations in unexpected ways. They avoided direct confrontation while creating maximum confusion. By her 13th birthday, Mena had become the unofficial strategic coordinator for resistance groups across 3 continents. The scared child who had emerged from an underground bunker had evolved into something the Vorthak had never encountered, a human who could think beyond the limitations of human military doctrine while remaining completely invisible to alien detection systems. The war was about to enter a new phase, and Mena was ready to show the Vorthak that their greatest mistake had been underestimating what humans could become when everything familiar was taken away. The Vorthak called her the anomaly in their internal communications. Commander Vexthul, leader of the Earth Occupation Forces, had spent months trying to understand how human resistance operations had become so sophisticated. His analysts reported impossible infiltrations, perfectly timed sabotage operations, and intelligence leaks that suggested the humans had developed technology superior to Vorthak sensors. What they never suspected was that their greatest enemy was a 13-year-old girl who traveled between resistance cells, carrying messages in her school backpack. Mena had changed during her year of underground warfare. She was taller now, her movements more controlled and purposeful. The innocent curiosity in her eyes had been replaced by a calculating intelligence that made even hardened survivors uncomfortable. She no longer looked like a child playing at war. She looked like war itself had shaped her into something new. The transformation was most obvious during strategy meetings. When adult resistance leaders argued about conventional military tactics, Mena would sit quietly in the corner, studying stolen Vorthak communications on her father's modified scanner. She had learned to think in ways that purely human minds struggled to follow. "They're planning something big," she announced during a gathering of cell leaders from across the Korean peninsula. Massive troop movements, supply buildups, new equipment, arriving from their homeworlds. Han Junwoo, now one of her most trusted allies, leaned forward with concern. "Another wave of city destructions?" "Worse," Mena replied, manipulating the scanner to show intercepted alien communications. "They're preparing for what they call final biological harvesting. They want to collect every useful life form from Earth, then sterilize the planet completely." The silence that followed was heavy with despair. After more than a year of resistance operations, the humans had managed to slow Vorthak operations and cause significant confusion in their ranks. But they had not prevented the aliens from accomplishing their core mission. "How long do we have?" asked Song Eunji, her voice barely above a whisper. 6 months, Mena said. "Maybe less." The gathering of resistance leaders looked around at each other with expressions of defeat. They had fought bravely, survived impossible odds, and accomplished more than anyone had thought possible. But stopping a planet-wide sterilization operation seemed beyond their capabilities. "We need to evacuate," Junwoo said finally. "Find places to hide until they leave?" "They won't leave," Mena replied quietly. "This is their final solution. They're going to make sure no Earth life survives to cause them problems in the future." "Then, what do you suggest?" Dr. Sumi asked. "We've done everything we can with guerrilla tactics." Mena stood up and walked to the map table where they had been planning their next small operations. With one sweep of her arm, she cleared away all their careful tactical plans. "We stop thinking small," she said. "We stop hiding and start attacking." The adults stared at her in shock. Everything Mena had taught them about survival was based on avoiding direct confrontation with superior Vorthak forces. "That's suicide," Woojin protested. "We've survived this long because we don't fight them directly." "We've survived," Mena agreed, "but we haven't won. And now we're out of time for survival tactics." She began drawing new plans on the map, but these were unlike anything she had proposed before. Instead of small, careful operations, she outlined coordinated attacks on major Vorthak installations across multiple continents. "You're talking about open warfare," Yinji said. "We don't have the weapons or numbers for that kind of fighting." "We," Don't need to match their weapons, Mina explained. We need to think like Vorthak for once. She pulled up communication intercepts that showed the growing paranoia and infighting among Vorthak commanders. Months of confusion tactics had created a climate of suspicion that was affecting their operational efficiency. They're already fighting each other in small ways, Mina continued. We're going to make that fighting bigger, much bigger. Her plan was audacious beyond anything the resistance had attempted. Instead of trying to defeat the Vorthak militarily, they would trigger a civil war within the occupation forces by making it appear that different factions were launching major attacks against each other. The northern commanders think the southern commanders are stealing their resources, Mena explained. The research divisions believe the military divisions are sabotaging their experiments. We're going to prove them right. The strategy required perfect timing and coordination between resistance cells that had never worked together on such a scale. More importantly, it required Mena to be in multiple places at once, coordinating operations while infiltrating the most heavily defended Vorthak facilities on the planet. This isn't a plan, Junwoo said after studying her proposals. This is impossible. Everything we've done has been impossible, Mena replied. That's why it worked. Over the next month, Mena pushed herself harder than ever before. She traveled constantly between resistance cells, teaching them specialized infiltration techniques and coordinating their preparations for simultaneous operations. She spent days inside Vorthak facilities, planting evidence that would implicate competing factions in acts of sabotage, but the constant stress and danger were taking their toll. Mena had grown thin and pale, her movements sharp with exhaustion. The other survivors began to worry that she was pushing herself toward a breakdown. You need to rest, Dr. Sumi told her after Mena returned from a particularly dangerous infiltration mission. You're not invincible. I don't need to be invincible, Mena replied, studying intelligence reports that had come in while she was away. I just need to be invisible for a few more weeks. The night before the coordinated attacks were scheduled to begin, Mena sat alone in the command center they had established in an abandoned subway station. Around her, dozens of resistance fighters made final preparations for operations that would either save humanity or get them all killed. She thought about her father, who had died believing that humans were too weak to fight back against advanced alien technology. She thought about all the adults who had initially dismissed her as just a child, who didn't understand the real world. Now she was 13 years old and commanding a continental resistance network that was about to attempt the largest military deception in human history. She had become something that neither humans nor aliens had expected, a child shaped by war into a weapon of pure strategic thinking. The scared little girl, who had hidden in an underground bunker, was gone forever. In her place sat someone who could calculate the deaths of thousands as acceptable losses if it meant saving millions. Someone who could manipulate alien psychology as easily as she had once played with toys. Tomorrow, the Vorthak would discover that their greatest mistake had not been underestimating human technology or military capability. Their greatest mistake had been creating an environment where a human child could grow into something that their rigid minds could never understand or predict. Mena checked her equipment one final time and prepared to begin the operation that would either end the war or end humanity's chances of survival. Either way, she would not die as a victim. She would die as the weapon she had chosen to become. The war ended not with massive explosions or heroic last stands, but with a conversation between a 13-year-old girl and an alien commander who finally understood what humanity really was. Mena's coordinated deception had worked better than anyone had dared hope. Across Earth, Vorthak factions turned their weapons on each other as evidence of sabotage and resource theft mounted beyond any reasonable explanation. What had started as small suspicions exploded into open warfare between different divisions of the occupation forces. The northern commanders accused the southern commanders of stealing their biological samples. The research divisions believed the military divisions were destroying their experiments. The orbital fleet suspected the ground forces of hiding valuable discoveries from them. Within 2 weeks, Vorthok installations across 3 continents were engaged in active combat with each other. Their rigid command structure, designed to prevent rebellion, became a weakness when conflicting orders came from competing authorities, but Mina knew the deception could not last forever. Eventually, Vorthok High Command would investigate the chaos and discover that humans were responsible for the internal warfare. When that happened, they would respond with the complete sterilization they had always planned. She had perhaps days before the truth came out. Days to accomplish something that had seemed impossible from the beginning, finding a way to convince an alien empire to abandon their conquest of Earth. The opportunity came when Commander Vextel's flagship landed to investigate the chaos personally. The massive vessel settled onto what had once been the outskirts of Seoul, protected by enough firepower to level a mountain range. "You're not seriously thinking of infiltrating that ship," Han Jung-woo said when Mina announced her intentions. Not going to infiltrate it," she replied, checking her equipment one last time. "I'm going to walk in the front door and ask to speak to their commander." The adults stared at her as if she had finally lost her mind. Dr. Sumi stepped forward with the concerned expression she used when she thought Mina was having a breakdown. "Sweetheart, they'll kill you the moment they see you." "No," Mina said, with the quiet confidence that had carried her through a year of impossible missions. "They'll be curious." Curiosity is the one emotion that overrides Vorthok military protocol. She was right. When a small human child walked calmly up to the flagship's main entrance and requested an audience with Commander Vextel, the guards were so shocked they actually called their superiors. Instead of simply shooting her, the message that reached the commander was so unusual that he ordered her brought aboard under heavy guard. He wanted to see for himself the human who had somehow reached his ship without triggering any security alerts. Mina found herself in a vast chamber filled with alien technology and surrounded by towering Vorthok soldiers. At the center sat Commander Vextel, a being nearly 4 meters tall with the bearing of someone accustomed to absolute authority. "You are the source of our difficulties," he said in accented but clear Korean. His voice carried the weight of someone making a statement rather than asking a question. "I am one source," Mina replied calmly, "but not the only one." "Explain." "Your species conquers by overwhelming force applied to organized resistance. You destroy governments and militaries, then harvest resources from the survivors. It's worked on dozens of worlds." Vextel leaned forward, genuinely interested despite himself. "Continue. But Earth is different. We're not organized like other species. When you destroyed our governments and militaries, you didn't break our resistance. You freed it." She gestured to herself, a small figure dwarfed by the alien technology surrounding her. "I'm not a soldier or a leader. I'm just someone who learned to think differently because traditional thinking was useless. And there are millions of humans like me now. Impossible. Our sensors would have detected organized resistance. We're not organized in ways your sensors can detect. We're organized like Earth life itself. Adaptive, resilient, impossible to completely eliminate." Mina pulled out her father's scanner and showed Vextel the data she had collected over months of infiltration operations. The device displayed detailed records of Vorthok activities, troop movements, and strategic planning. "This shows how thoroughly you've infiltrated our operations," Vextel admitted, his tone carrying something that might have been respect. "It shows something more important than that," Mina replied. "It shows that every day you stay on Earth we learn more about you. We adapt to your technology, we understand your psychology, and we become more effective at disrupting your operations." She manipulated the scanner to show trend analyses that painted a clear picture. Human resistance was growing more sophisticated. Every month, while Vorthok efficiency was declining due to internal conflicts and the constant need to guard against infiltration. "In 5 years, we'll be able to seriously damage your operations," Mina continued. "In 10 years, we'll be able to drive you off Earth entirely. In 20 years, we'll be able to follow you home." The threat was delivered in the same calm tone she might use to discuss the weather, but its implications hung heavy in the chamber's artificial atmosphere. "You're threatening the Vorthek Empire with extinction," Vexthal said, his voice carrying dangerous undertones. "I'm explaining evolution," Mina replied. "Earth life adapts to survive? You've created an environment where humans are adapting to fight you specifically. Every year you stay, we become more dangerous to your entire empire." She showed him biological data that proved her point. Earth organisms collected by the Vorthek were indeed adapting to alien environments at unprecedented rates. Some had already begun producing toxins that could harm Vorthak physiology. "Your own research proves that Earth life fights back in ways you never encountered before," she continued. "We're not just another species to be harvested. We're a biological weapon that gets stronger every time you attack us." Vexthal studied the data for long minutes while his guards watched the small human, who had somehow made their commander genuinely thoughtful. "What do you propose?" he asked finally. "Leave Earth alone? Mark it as too dangerous for conquest? Tell your empire that the biological contamination risk is too high. And in exchange, we won't follow you home." The simplicity of the deal was its strength. The Vorthak would lose one planet's worth of resources, but they would avoid a long-term threat that could potentially spread throughout their empire. "You're one child," Vexthal pointed out. "You cannot speak for your entire species." "I'm the child who has been coordinating resistance operations across 3 continents," Mina replied. "I'm the child who proved that your technology can be infiltrated, and your operations can be disrupted. I'm the child who showed other humans that your empire is not invincible." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "But more than that, I'm proof of what humans become when you try to destroy us. Every year you stay, there will be more like me. Smarter, more dangerous, and completely unpredictable." Commander Vexthal made his decision with the pragmatic efficiency that had made the Vorthek Empire successful. The potential long-term threat outweighed the immediate resource benefits of conquering Earth. "The evacuation will begin immediately," he announced. "All Vorthek forces will withdraw from Earth within 30 days. Mina nodded as if she had expected nothing less. "Thank you for making the logical choice." As she was escorted from the flagship, Mina felt the weight of exhaustion finally settling on her shoulders. The war was over, not through military victory but through a combination of psychological warfare and evolutionary threat that no alien empire could ignore. 6 months later, Earth's skies were clear of alien ships. Human survivors emerged from underground hideouts to begin rebuilding their world. But they were no longer the same species that had been conquered 2 years earlier. Mina, now 14 and looking far older than her years, stood on a hill overlooking the ruins of Seoul as reconstruction efforts began below. She had saved humanity, but the cost had been her childhood, her innocence, and any chance of living a normal life. Han Zhenwu approached from behind, moving quietly in the way all survivors had learned. "The new government wants to make you a general," he said. "I'm not a soldier," Mina replied without turning around. "I never was. What are you then?" She considered the question for a long moment, watching humans work together to rebuild what aliens had destroyed. "I'm what humans become when everything else is taken away," she said finally. "I'm proof that we adapt to survive anything, even if it changes us into something we never expected to be." The story of the child who ended an interstellar war spread throughout human space as Earth rejoined the galactic community. But those who met Mena in later years always noted the same thing. She had the eyes of someone who had seen too much too young, and the quiet confidence of someone who knew that humans could survive anything the universe chose to throw at them. She had been only a child when the war began, but she had become something far more dangerous, a human being with nothing left to lose and everything necessary to win.